Hey, what's going on, everyone? Axel here. Today, I want to talk about the two main ways of improving your character after they reach level cap. As we all know, in DDO and really any MMO, the game doesn't really stop once you reach cap. You can improve your character in a variety of ways. And DDO, I think, has more options than most. But in DDO, you have two main options. You have Reincarnation, where you go back to either level 1 or level 20, depending if you're doing Heroic Reincarnation or Epic Reincarnation, and you get some extra benefits from doing that. You get a past life feat, and you get to continue playing by continuing your way through more content, leveling back up to cap, where you can either decide to play in-game or you can reincarnate again to get more benefits, etc. And then there is the second way of improving your character, which is sticking to level cap, staying there, and grinding out gear, really focusing on making your character the best character they can be at level 30. So I want to talk about these two different options once you reach cap, which one's better than the other, which one I prefer, some of the benefits and cons of each type. So let's get started. So Reincarnation, there's a lot of different types of them now, especially now. There used to only be Heroic Reincarnation where you would go back to level 1, but now there are all kinds of different types. We have Heroic Reincarnation, as I just stated. We have Epic Reincarnation, where you go back from level 30 to level 20, and there's a whole different group of feats you can get for that. There is Racial Reincarnation now, where you can get special benefits from playing through the game as a specific race. There is Iconic Reincarnation, where you can get special benefits from playing through as a iconic character. So there's a lot of different types, and if you're a new player or someone who hasn't reincarnated much, there is enough reincarnation past lives to keep you busy for years and years. So there's a lot to do for sure. And I think this is the kind of endgame, if you want to call this endgame. Some people call reincarnation endgame. I don't know if that's the best terminology for it, since endgame to me implies staying at the end of the game. But regardless, it's your option, an option to choose, a very popular option these days for continuing to improve your character after they reach level cap. So some of the things about this is unlike your endgame. Reincarnating is, of course, XP focused. You're focused on improving your character by accumulating XP as fast as possible, basically. Whereas if you just stay at cap, you don't really care about XP because you can't gain more XP to improve your character in most cases, unless you still need to max out all of your epic destinies, something like that. But for the most part, when you're at cap, you don't have to do that. So it's very XP focused. Whereas staying at cap that involves improving your characters by grinding out loot. It's almost strictly loot focused, and the developers do try to give people a plentiful amount of loot to grind out for. The most popular probably way of grinding out loot is through raids, because traditionally these really have only existed at cap. Now, of course, there are raids that have that are in leveling content, but it's more of an activity that you do strictly at cap. Like, I don't see very many people getting together to run, say, at level chronoscope, for example. It's just not very common. It's not that you can't do it. It's just not all that common, because the point when you're at level 6 or 7 or whatever is not to grind raids for gear. It's to increase your XP, especially for gear that's already outdated, or long since outdated. So those are the two types. One's loot focused, one's XP focused. Now, which one's better? I think this has changed a lot in the past and to the game the way it is today. I think in the past, generally in-game has been quote-unquote better, because there's been a lot to do. Like, for example, when Shroud was in-game, there were a lot of different raids you could grind out. There's a lot to do. There was a lot of good reason to grind out that gear, because a lot of it didn't strictly function at cap. Say Heroic Green Steel, for example. That gear, you could go back all the way back to level 11. I think you can start using it on characters, so it also helped you out if you wanted to transition from raiding to start grinding out heroic past lives. You could do that and still get some benefits from your raid gear. That's not as prominent today. I think we've seen a shift towards reincarnation being the quote-unquote endgame in the past several years for a variety of reasons. Probably the biggest reason being that you get so much from reincarnating now, just because there's so many different bonuses you can go after. And these bonuses, unlike loot you might grind out at cap, are permanent. So if you grind out, say, a Paladin Heroic Past Life to get 5% buff to your healing amp, that's permanent. You will always have that on your character. You can't lose it. You don't have to waste a feat taking it. There isn't going to come out be a better feat, heroic past life feat for paladins that's going to overlap that you're going to have to obtain again. So there's a lot there, and there are just tons and tons of feats now. As I mentioned before, we have, back in the day, we just had heroic reincarnation. Now we have epic reincarnation, we have racial reincarnation, iconic reincarnation, and while it's not strictly a thing you do leveling, we now have Reaper XP. There's also been a difference between the amount of raids we have today as compared to the number of raids we have had, say, when Shroud was in game. As I just mentioned before, it seems like we haven't had, the team seems like they've not put out the number of raids kind of needed to recapture that kind of in game. Because, say, for example, we have back in the day when we had like Hound and Shroud and Tempest Spine, and well, actually that wasn't a level 20 cap raid, but stuff like Hound of Zoriat, Vision of Destruction. We had like all of the epic level raids, like true epic level 20, like Chronoscope 20. When that was epic, you could run that at cap. So there's just a lot of stuff with some really good gear there you could grind out. Whereas the past several years, it seems like we've only had, say, 1 or 2 relevant raids at any one time. So I think that's been a difference. It's just been more compelling to go after the reincarnations just because they're there. There's a lot to obtain there, and I think a lot of players kind of burn through the raiding content. I think players do run it at first, but I think people tend to automatically default back to reincarnation just because there's so much more to earn there. There's so much more to achieve, and so many more ways to improve your character, so many more options. I think there's a lot of different reasons, things you can do when you want to decide which one you would prefer. I think one advantage of staying at endgame is it's not as grind focused, in my opinion. With leveling content, with going after heroic past lives, the focus for your kind of your everyday players is XP per minute. There's a lot of zerging. There's a lot of running through quests as fast as possible. It's very grind based, where not to say endgame isn't grind based, because you still have to grind out all your gear and all that stuff, but it seems like with leveling content there's more grind involved, because say if you want completionist, you've got a lot more to grind out there, whereas if you just want to grind out 1 or 2 pieces of raid gear, that's not as much work comparatively. I think one thing that's important when deciding, do you want to focus on reincarnation or do you want to focus on like traditional cap endgame, is do you like raiding? Because that's really the biggest appeal of endgame, because that's where there's actually some semblance of an active raiding scene. Does not exist in leveling content for the most part. Yeah, people will get together and run stuff like Chronoscope or something just as for leveling, but it's not done repetitively or on a regular basis. From my experience, it's definitely usually not done at level. There's usually a lot of people over level, so it's more focused on running that for the XP rather than actually running it for the gear. Whereas people will repeatedly run raids at cap at level 30 just to get the gear. They won't just. There's no one. What I'm trying to say is there's no one who's going to sit at low levels just to run Chronoscope. Maybe someone has a part character or something, but as a general rule, people aren't going to stop leveling their character at level 7 or 8 or whatever just so they can run Chronoscope. I think one other thing that's important when deciding if you want to run in-game at cap or if you want to start reincarnating is, are you in an active guild? Because the population of the game certainly has continue to decrease as it's gotten older, and it's become, in my experience, harder and harder to get a group for in-game raids if you're not in an active, say, an organized raiding guild, because a lot of the in-game ratings, from my experience, tend to be run in guilds now and not so many public, because as someone who watches the public LFM all the time, I'm not seeing it very often. Yeah, there are some, but it's not as prevalent as it once was. Usually, back in the day, it didn't matter really if you were in a guild or not, because there are so many public raid LFMs up, so many people willing to run raids and lead raids, that if you weren't in a guild, it didn't really matter because you still had a plethora of LFMs available. Whereas today, you kind of need to be in a guild, I think, or at least it helps a lot to get consistent groups, because those LFMs aren't always going to be there. You're not going to always be able to scrape together 12 random people to run an in-game raid. So that is a big difference. Now let's talk about what is best. As I've kind of alluded to before, I think I think that reincarnation right now is the most quote unquote optimal or advantageous thing to do if you just strictly want to improve your character. But again, it should always come down to what you enjoy most, just for fun, because this game in the end is just for fun. But I think that today, definitely, if you had to choose between the two, all both being equal in terms of how much you enjoy them, I would say reincarnation is the better option. There's just so much to go through. I mean, there's epic past lives, heroic past lives, racial past lives, iconic past lives. There's so many things to achieve. That's a lot of ways to improve your character. And if you get a lot of those, it does make a significant difference in your character, even if any one individually doesn't actually help your character all that much. Now, with endgame staying at level 30, I think the game just hasn't been able to offer the amount of content kind of needed to sustain that kind of endgame on a consistent basis. It's just the rating scene, in my opinion, just hasn't been able to get them consistent content to keep that scene as alive, whereas there is a plethora of leveling content in DDO. There is tons of plethora of rating content, and if you stay at cap, you're going to be also kind of limiting yourself to certain content in your level range. I think that the rise of raid bypass timer hourglasses have kind of changed the rating scene, because I think since those were introduced, we haven't really seen the rating scene be all that the same. And I've been a pretty vocal critic of those in the past, and I still feel that way, that they're really not good for the game. But it's something that Standing Stone Games now has decided to do to monetize the game, because they need to make money. So I can't fault them for that, because they got to keep the lights on, especially now that they're an independent game studio. They probably need to really focus on their monetization even more, because they don't have the financial backing of a company like that. But I do think that has changed the rating scene by making the content less. It doesn't last as long. It's much easier to grind through it, because back in the day, before we had timers that we could skip, it would take a minimum of like 3 months to get to your 20th completion. Whereas today, you can just stock up on hourglasses from the store and grind out your 20th list in like a week. So it's, or even in some cases, you can do it in one single, like say a raid like Mark of Death, you can even do it in one day, grind out a 20th completion. So it's changed things a lot. And as a result, I think that there's a lot of people out there who will spend a few weeks on raiding content. The really serious players will spend maybe a few weeks to a month at cap to grind out what they want, and then start reincarnating again. So there hasn't really been that consistent population that we've seen in the past. But let's now talk about what I prefer. Even though I think that reincarnation is the most optimal thing to do today, and I think it lets you play a lot of different content and get a lot of cool different bonuses to your character, I personally have always preferred just staying at cap, and that's still what I try to do today. Now, I recently reincarnated just to play through just because I'm going to be playing through a lot of Ravenloft content anyways, but I am planning to just stay at cap most likely once I get up there, and the other reason was because I had to redo my build, so it made sense to epic reincarnate. But once I get up to cap this time, I'm probably just going to stay there, because I've always enjoyed raiding. The thing about raids is running raiding content consistently with good groups is all about working as a team, focusing on accomplishing one goal as a team. Whereas when you talk about running through past lives, it's focused not really on working as a team. It's more about just going through the content as fast as possible. So that's the difference. I've always enjoyed kind of the team aspect of ratings and endgame, and not so much the kind of more grindy, zergy aspect of your reincarnation. And as I've gotten older and I've had less time to play the game, I found that I really can't keep up with the reincarnation hamster wheel, because I used to reincarnate a little bit. I've never been huge into it, but I can't really keep up with that because I have a lot more limited time to play now. So if I wanted to reincarnate, I would find myself with long periods of my character not being at cap, which is a problem for me because I like running the raids. I like running the new content like Ravenloft. Granted, Ravenloft is also offered on heroics, but I still like running I want to start running the Ravenloft raids, things like that, and I want to stay at cap to run other raids. And if I can't run raids, it's kind of a big problem for me because that's the most important thing to me in DDS, the thing I enjoy the most. So guys, that's going to be it for this video. Comment below, let me know what you think. Do you prefer staying at cap and raiding, or do you prefer reincarnating, going through past lives? Just leave a comment and let me know. Hope you all enjoyed this video. I will see you all next time. Have a good one. Take care.